Next on BYUSN, all dressed up and ready for Vegas. BYU football heads to their home away from home as a 3-point underdog. You okay with that?
And the Cougars will be donning some new drip. And it's a knockout. See what I did there?
I did indeed. Welcome to BYU Sports Station, presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere. It is Monday, October 3rd. I am Spencer Linton. He is ombre helmet collector, Jarom Jordan.
I didn't know what that word meant until today. It's kind of a blending of colors from one to another, right? Which, if you missed it, BYU football wearing some serious, awesome swag against Notre Dame Saturday. Check this out.
Now, gentlemen, that is a clean look, but it doesn't exactly scream fight night in Vegas, if you know what I mean.
I don't know if we got time for anything else.
Come on, this is Vegas. Anything's possible. Let's see if we can call in a favor.
Yo. The winner and the star of the headline show in Las Vegas is Matt Franco!
Yeah. No, I'm backstage at the link right now, but if you need my help, I'll be there. Cool. I'm on my way.
What's going on, guys?
What's up, man?
How are you? Getting ready for the big game in Vegas?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Puko, is this what you're wearing, or?
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I heard you guys would need a little help with the uniforms, but I could probably help you, but I need to know what you want to do.
Okay.
But don't tell me, though. I want you to just visualize in your mind right now your ideal uniform combo. Think about it. Think about the colors. Don't say it yet. Just think it, right? And I want you to focus on the helmet. I'll sketch a little something for you. Go grab the markers. Thanks, man. I'm thinking royal blue. Obviously, someone's got royal right now.
Royal.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Let me add some of that in there for you. Here, yeah. Someone's thinking a little bit of black,
thinking black.
too?
A lot of black.
Yeah? Oh, a lot. All right, hold on. Let me see if we can do that. And I don't know helmet-wise exactly what you want to do. Is this kind of looking like something like what you want?
I think we can put it together.
I'll tell you what. It's a little bit easier if you put it together like this. Now, I want you to hold it so they can see. We got the helmet actually as royal blue, but then it turns into black. It's almost like a magic trick in itself. Hey, I hope you like it, guys, because I'll tell you what, that's what you're wearing. And the best part?
I'm ready for war, applying pressure because I pictured this moment relentless. I'm running like engines inside of a Tesla. I'm ready for war. I'm destined for greatness, that's where to Muhammad Ali. I'm up on the scene, I told you I'm up on the scene. Yeah, I'm ready for war. I'm ready for war tonight. Yeah. The side of the score tonight. Yeah.
Who's ready for football?
Hey!
Who's ready for football?
Dude, that was awesome. And that was great. Matt Franco and Forrest Griffin involved. And I've seen that, I think, 3 times now, and I noticed another thing or two from the first time. Oh, so many tricks there.
Yeah, fantastic stuff.
Amazing.
Incredible production quality right there. It's good to have connections with your Puka Nacua in the UFC.
He knows Dana White.
Yes, he does.
What's the connection? Dana White's kid grew up with Puka or
Correct.
something in Vegas, right?
Yep. Yeah, grew up together.
I did the thing where I asked a question, but I knew
And then
the
you
answer.
answered it. You knew the answer.
Super annoying to me when people do that. I just did that. Yeah. But anyway, on today's show, hey, it's BYU Notre Dame week. Big game, big unis, big conversation. We'll discuss a lot about this matchup, including ESPN's Trevor Matich joining the program. An amazing Cougars in the NFL Sunday, highlighted by the return of Zach Wilson and the return of me being competitive in fantasy. And Cosmo goes viral again. Again. He does his thing. But first, let's cook up some headlines.
BYU football jumps 3 spots in the latest Associated Press poll to number 16. Hey, there is power in just winning. Even when it's ugly. 10 top 25 teams lost over the last weekend, assisting in BYU's rise up those rankings. And for those concerned with the coaches or SID poll, and I know you are, Jarom.
Love the SID.
BYU is also number 16 in that poll.
Cool, man. Cougars in the NFL, what a day. And Zach Wilson's return to the Jets. He went 18 for 36, 252 yards, 1 touchdown passing, 2 picks, had a receiving touchdown. What? Hit the gritty after. Wilson finished the game 10 of 12 for 128 yards in the fourth quarter and a touchdown. Back-to-back scoring drives to win at Pittsburgh.
Clutch.
Big time. Big time. Jamal Williams had 19 carries for 108, 2 touchdowns for Lions, and a loss to the Seahawks. And Taysom Hill had a rushing TD, 5 carries for 21 yards. In Charlie, England, for the Saints, and a loss to the Vikings. Crazy finish there with a missed field.
Other Cougs in the National Football League, Tyler Algier had a breakout game.
Yeah.
10 carries for 84 yards, a long of 42, 1 catch for 20 yards. In a Falcons win over Sione Takitaki, who had 4 tackles, and the Cleveland Browns. Dax Milne, 1 kickoff return for 18 yards, couple of punt returns. In a loss for his Commanders to the Cowboys, Kyle Van Noy, 4 tackles, and an LA Chargers win over the Texans. Fred Warner and the 49ers take on the defending Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams tonight.
That has fantasy implications, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. Number 15, women's volleyball beat Gonzaga in 4 sets Saturday in Spokane, led by Aaron Livingston, 17 kills and a career-high 18 digs. Cougars return home to host Santa Clara Thursday night, 9 Eastern on BYU TV.
BYU women's soccer playing to a 0-0 draw at St. Mary's in their West Coast Conference opener on Saturday. The ladies back in action Wednesday at home against San Francisco. That too on BYU TV at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Swim and dive competed in the Intermountain Shootout Friday and Saturday, winning 15 golds, 12 silvers, 11 bronze medal finishes. Won the meet with a score of 1,141.
BYU men's tennis in action today at the ITA All-American National Championships. The tournament stretches through the week.
And men's rugby beat up Colorado State 86-9. They are coached by the great Steve St. Peter.
All rise and shout. It's time for What's Trending, presented by BYU Food to Go, the MVP of your next event. Underdog in Vegas. BYU, a field goal exactly as an underdog heading into Sin City. Jarom, do you like BYU going into this game 4-1, ranked number 16, but as a 3-point underdog against Notre Dame?
I don't like it, Spence. I love it.
Oh.
Because BYU is 4-0 as a dog this year. 4-0! The one that BYU lost, they weren't the favorite. It was Oregon, right? And that's okay. I think BYU plays better as a dog, better as the perceived, hey, we don't have the target on our back. We're not ranked 12th going into Autzen. Obviously, that'd be tough, even if you were the number 1 team in the country to play there. So not that big a deal there. But it is interesting to see how this line has evolved over the past couple months, obviously because you play some games. But when it opened in May, Notre Dame by 9.5. And then even weeks and a month or two ago, it was different. BYU matches up with Notre Dame in a way where this is going to be a fun game. Now, the way BYU played the last couple of games doesn't give you a ton of confidence against Notre Dame in a vacuum. But when you've actually watched Notre Dame and you actually see the stats for Notre Dame and the injuries and the toll of losing at Ohio State, most people would. Even Alabama, Georgia, probably lose that game, right? But Notre Dame put up a decent fight there. But when you lose to Marshall at home and you play Cal close at home, and then you explode for, 45 points, I think, against North Carolina, or 42. Certainly you feel like, oh, the offense woke up for Notre Dame. But they gave up 35. Like, Drake May's a good young quarterback for North Carolina. I like BYU's chances here in this game against Notre Dame. It's mighty Notre Dame. We're not going to care what their record is when the season's over. We're just going to cherish a potential win there. No one knows or cares what Notre Dame was at 94 and 04. They were 5-1 and 6-6 respectively. That's a big win no matter what, because it's the Golden Domers, it's Rudy, it's Touchdown Jesus, it's the helmets, it's the 4 horsemen, it's everything. I'm stoked that BYU's a dog, because now I think BYU can go, hey, people say we haven't been good enough the last couple weeks, and you haven't, and oh, it's Notre Dame, they're the favorite. I love that BYU walks in here with some extra motivation.
I am in favor of BYU being an underdog in every game from here on out, if possible.
Every game?
I'm fine.
East Carolina
I'm fine with that. Because
Utah Tech.
It just
Live on BYU
establishes
TV.
an expectation of, oh, well, BYU is not supposed to win the game. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, BYU was actually an underdog going into the Oregon game. Even though they're a higher-ranked team, they were a 3-point underdog against
Was
Oregon.
BYU the favorite at home against Baylor? Am I off on that? Okay, so
Yes.
3-1 then.
So BYU covers
favored
in
games.
double overtime. They were a 3.5-point favorite at home against Baylor. They win by 6 because of the overtime touchdown and how that
I
game
take
played
it all
out.
back.
Okay, but still, the idea remains that BYU as an underdog, for me, is just a much more comfortable position to be in mentally, as trying to put the chip on the shoulder and hoping that BYU establishes a little bit more of that physicality that they had early in the season. Whatever it takes to get them ramped up and going again, because for whatever reason, it just hasn't, the sharpness, the discipline, it hasn't been there the past few games. So maybe if you hear all week, you're the number 16 team in the country, you're 4-1, Notre Dame's 2-2, not receiving any votes
Zero.
at all
Crazy.
in any poll,
Just like we thought at the beginning of the year.
and yet the Irish
What?
are the clear favorite according to Vegas. So if I'm on BYU,
Well, is it clear? It's just by 3.
Well, it's at
that's
it's at a neutral site too.
So
if this game's in South Bend, they're saying Notre Dame's probably 6 points better.
yeah.
This is interesting to me.
3's not much. It's not a touchdown. It's not 2 scores. No, this is a fair fight, man.
It's interesting to me. If I'm going to take it and utilize that to my psyche and my
Do
bet
it.
as much as I possibly can. Like, they think Notre Dame is just straight up better than BYU on a neutral field, even if it's by 3 points. You're the number 16 team in the country. Go and prove it. We talked to Matt Berry of ESPN last Thursday, and he said the thing he likes most about BYU's schedule is they have undoubtedly back-to-back opportunities, a chance to prove that they are legitimate once again, that the Baylor win wasn't just a one-off, that the Oregon game was an aberration. Now you have a chance to prove it, and if this allows you any type of psychological advantage knowing that you're an underdog, exploit that. Utilize it all week. If anybody's listening to me on the BYU football team, people don't expect you to win. Like, the Vegas insiders do not expect you to win against a team that's not receiving any votes in the AP poll, and you're the number 16 team, so go and prove it.
The last 2 weeks, we have held BYU to a Vegas standard as well. Vegas says you should win by 24. Vegas says you should win by 21. BYU didn't do that, and there was disappointment. I wonder if BYU just needs a matchup like this to show up. Like, Oregon was one thing. Baylor at home was like BYU got way up for that. Home opener,
no question.
the game last year, ... Notre Dame has certainly been on the schedule on the mind for a while. We've hoped for this game for a long time. It didn't happen in Provo. I don't think the team's ticked about it. I think the fans maybe are over it now. Maybe they're not, wanting that at home and being so bummed about that not being the case. There's a lot of reasons to be ticked off and go into this game and prove yourself, which, by the way, there's a huge gap between metrics and polls right now with BYU. Metrics, Massey is a compilation. 38th FEI, 38th SP Plus, 39th Sagarin, 42nd. They're telling us that BYU is good, but not great.
Yeah.
BYU has a chance to prove it's very good the next 2 weeks.
Those metrics favor Notre Dame.
Absolutely. And they would. Because Notre Dame. But metrics typically take out the shininess of the program. It's just what you've done on the field.
Yes.
Notre Dame is certainly vulnerable. Playing with Drew Pine, the backup. Offensively, Michael Mayer may be the best player that BYU plays on any opposing team all year. Like, that dude is first round, best tight end in the country, amazing. Like, incredible hands, dude. Like, he's 6'4", like 260. No one, like, you can't box him out. He's super physical, incredible catch radius. Like, against Notre Dame on third down, they just find him. And he is going to be tough to stop. But if BYU can run the ball enough and Jaron Hall can carry BYU, this is a Jaron Hall game, by the way. This is a Jaron Hall game. He can put a ton of film out there that can help himself and BYU, because when you play Notre Dame and it's on NBC, people watch.
Yeah.
People watch. This is a huge opportunity for a Cougar team that should be hungry based on not performing up to standard the last 2 weeks. I'm excited that BYU has this game when it has it, because it's game 6 now. We're in the middle of the season. You find out who you really are around this time.
You want to know what Notre Dame is? Notre Dame is a lot like Baylor, Jarom. Really solid defense, pretty stout run game, and a relatively young but capable quarterback, but prone to some errors if you can get to him.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is another version of Baylor. Okay. By the way, Baylor just outside the top 25. Like, I feel like Notre Dame's in that kind of genre with Baylor. It's going to be a very physical, perhaps low-scoring game.
Yeah. Let's go, man. Okay, topic 2. Which Cougar in the NFL had the best weekend? There were several great candidates.
Yes, amazing, but it's not close, Jarom.
It's not I agree.
Even close.
We're going to have the same answer, and it's Daniel Sorensen.
100% it's Zach Wilson.
Yep.
Because Zach Wilson became clutch Zach Wilson yesterday. In the fourth quarter, when it matters most, in years past, for decades, it feels like if you're a New York Jets fan, when all hope is lost, the Jets are going to lose. Jets are they don't even rally in the fourth quarter on the road.
They also don't have a quarterback who catches a touchdown pass.
The Jets don't rally in the fourth quarter on the road.
Against Pittsburgh, no less.
Okay.
Like, that's a tough place to play.
Say what you will about the Steelers' offense, and it's bad. Their defense is pretty good. Their defense is still pretty good.
Yep. Zach
Wilson was almost perfect in the fourth quarter. And to watch, like, prominent members of the New York media, headlined by Mike Greenberg of ESPN, who is a lifelong Jets fan, kind of just, yes, fall in love with Zach all over again. Yeah, it's like, sigh, Zach Wilson. Like, I was watching Mike Greenberg do that. Yeah. Just swooning over his
a lot of swooning going over Zach
capabilities.
Yeah.
Was really enjoyable. Like, he made a name for himself yesterday by rallying the Jets to a win against the Steelers. The Jets are 2-2, so now, like, all Jets fans are like, hey, Brady Quinn, how about that 0-4 start you called for from the Jets? Or Stephen A. Smith, you said the Jets were going to be 0-4 and they stink. Maybe they're turning the corner. Maybe they found their quarterback. For right now, because it was his first start coming off injury and he did that,
you got to feel good.
He clearly had the best weekend of any BYU football player in the NFL.
Not even close, highlighted by the fourth quarter, because going into the fourth quarter, he's 50% completion rate. It's not great.
And he's playing with two offensive linemen that aren't, like, he's lost two of his best offensive linemen.
There's always something with the Jets, right? But he had thrown 2 picks. One was a tip. It wasn't his fault. The other was his fault. He catches a touchdown. But the 2 drives at the end of the game, when they're up 10. Now they're down 10 in the fourth quarter. And he goes 10 of 12 for 128 and a touch in the fourth. That's big time. And it wasn't like he played the crappiest. It wasn't like he played at Jacksonville or something. You know what I mean? No, this is at Pittsburgh. Like, this is a tougher situation. I know Ben Roethlisberger's not there, and this isn't like 5 years ago or whatever, but that was impressive. Jamal Williams leads the NFL in the touchdowns, by the way, rushing. That's amazing. He's playing so well right now.
It was great. That's saying something, because Jamal had an amazing day yesterday, as did Tyler
Ran all
Algier.
over my Seahawks defense, just stiff-arming fools.
It's still not close because Zach was so good.
Zach was so good, and Taysom Hill scores a rushing touchdown. So he had 5 touchdowns from Cougars. There's not a good category or base to look at this, but I would guess that that's up there in BYU history as to a amount of touchdowns from Cougars in a single day in the NFL.
You're leading the NFL in touchdowns.
And then shout out to Tyler Algier, 10 for 84, had 20 yards receiving as well, so he goes over 100 total. That's pretty awesome. That was a great day for the Cougs.
How about Jamal? Would love to see the Lions get a few more wins. I know you're Seahawks, but like,
I don't actually want Seattle to win this year. I want a great quarterback.
Tank for Jaron.
I'm tank for Jaron. Yeah, that's what I want.
Tank for Jaron. Our question of the day.
We'll have to tank. He'll be there. He'll be there in the first.
Do you like BYU football going into the Notre Dame game as an underdog? Yes or no?
Come on.
Let's hear from you, BYUSN and Voice of the Nation. All right. Coulter Gill on Twitter says, yes, because in recent games, BYU comes out swinging if they are the underdogs, while as when BYU is favored, they don't play with the same energy. Now, again, as I pointed out, BYU was the underdog against Oregon, but that feels like a different scenario because you're playing at Autzen Stadium. Oregon is clearly a team desperate to prove something after they were embarrassed by Georgia, they did.
We knew they were good. We didn't know how good. They're up to 12, right, where BYU was. So
wouldn't you know, week-to-week variance, Georgia beats Oregon by 46 and has to survive by 4 against Missouri.
Kent State, 22 points last week.
So does that mean Kent State would beat Oregon head-to-head?
Kent State is the best team in the country right now. And, in fact, they're going to talk about it coming up on the Coordinator's Corner. No. Gregor Bell is joined by Aaron Roderick.
Golden Flashes.
Ed Lamb. So they're not merely the Flashes. That's coming up at 2 Eastern time on the BYU TV app in this very studio.
Up next on BYU Sports Nation, ESPN's Trevor Matich joins us to look ahead to the Notre Dame game.
Yeah.
How does BYU clean things up, specifically in their run defense, and beat the Irish? He tells us next on BYU Sports Nation.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by BYU Food to Go, the MVP of your next event.
They prefer to be bringing the heat, getting set for success, demonstrating their drive. But when their blood and sweat turns to tears or anything else, we lay the groundwork for BYU's athletes to hit the ground running again, and you as well. Intermountain Healthcare, official medical provider for BYU Athletics.
Accidents don't just happen 9 to 5. They happen when you least expect them. The team at Siegfried & Jensen is here for you 24/7. Nights, weekends, every day, every hour. Really here for you. No matter when you call us, you'll speak to a real person and have access to the same expertise and personal attention as always, and get the legal help you need when you need it. Nights, weekends, every day, every hour, 24/7.
Learn more at siegfriedandjensen.com.
Everyone says that.
Hall of Famer, how did you not rank? MVP, I'm committed to the ship. Hey, you looking at a champ. Hey, you looking at a champ. You looking at a champ. You looking at a champ. Hey, all I do is win.
Welcome back to BYU Sports Nation live on a Monday here in Studio B. I am Spencer Linton, teamed up alongside Jarom Jordan for your day-to-day BYU Sports play-by-play. It is our privilege now, with those swaggy black uniforms in mind, to bring in a guy who's not going to assess the uniforms per se, but he will assess the football this week between the Golden Domers and BYU. He is ESPN's Trevor Matich, joining us for another Matich Monday. Trevor, here we go. Notre Dame week for BYU. The Cougars trying to get to 5-1 as the 16th ranked team in the country, but they're a 3-point underdog. What do you think of the line that has BYU as an underdog against Notre Dame?
I think that's kind of fair. ESPN's Football Power Index, the FPI, gives BYU only a 30% chance to win this game. And that takes into account a whole lot of things. So that 3-point underdog actually seems to be pretty fair.
Okay, BYU Notre Dame. We've got the line. We've got 5 games worth. Notre Dame had a bye. Their offense woke up against North Carolina. Granted, they gave up a bunch of points too. What do you think of this matchup, especially after BYU coming off of 2 wins at home, but a lot of the fan base feels like, and us, feels like they could have done more?
This actually is a pretty good matchup in favor of BYU, at least when you look at their offense against the Notre Dame defense. The Notre Dame defense is the strength of their team, but the teams that have done the best against them have been able to throw the ball down the field. Their previous game against North Carolina, Notre Dame dominated most of that game, but in the second half, quarterback for North Carolina, Drake May, started throwing the ball down the field, and he had success. He had some big passes that kind of kept them close. And BYU's got the ability to do that. They've got the offensive line to protect. And if the receivers are relatively healthy, they've got multiple guys that'll give Coach Roderick, offensive coordinator, and Coach Sataki, the passing game coordinator, Fesi Sataki, the ability to scheme matchups. And so BYU's offense has things that they'll be able to do to move the ball if they can execute. On the other side of the ball, it's the opposite. Notre Dame's offense is very much built on running the ball downhill. They've had 3 running backs emerge, so they'll have a stable of fresh backs to pound the ball. And the offensive line, early in the season, struggled. They had some injury issues. They've got guys that don't have a lot of experience coming into this season at both tackles. I mean, the right tackle is a guy that this is his first year as a starter. The left tackle was a tight end in high school, who's now building his way into the starting role as an offensive lineman. And so the offensive line of Notre Dame has gotten better as the season's grown. And against North Carolina, they started really pounding the ball. It seems like they've matured a lot. Now, you can say that North Carolina's defense not that great, but BYU's defense has not shown itself to be as good as they expected to be at stopping the run. So that Notre Dame rushing attack will be key for the BYU defense. They've got to limit that, or else Notre Dame will just grind out the clock.
Trevor, the question is, how does BYU's defensive front do that against a team like Notre Dame when the Cougars have looked definitely exploitable versus Wyoming and Utah State? What changes need to happen across the defensive front to be able to stop a running attack like Notre Dame has?
Well, first, knock off the penalties. Quit jumping off sides. Stop it with the personal fouls. Don't hurt yourself. Notre Dame will do plenty to try to hurt you in terms of your football success. And then you've got to be really stout on that defensive line. I wouldn't worry too much about the downfield passing game for Notre Dame until they prove they can hit it, because they've got their backup quarterback in, Drew Pine, and he's been efficient, but he doesn't have that big arm. And the receivers on the outside for Notre Dame are a work in progress. Where they're strong is in the passing game, is it to the tight end and to the running back. So Michael Mayer is one of the best tight ends in the country for Notre Dame, and they're going to throw the ball to him a lot, right? So they've got to worry about that. They've got to come up and gum up the short passing lanes and the line of scrimmage to stop that running game. So that's what they've got to do, and they've got to trust the corners to be able to lock up in man coverage. If they can do that, then BYU can bring extra guys up to the line. They can do run stunts and stunt up in the line. They can bring extra guys up to help with Michael Mayer. And that really is the key to success for BYU's defense. We talk about stopping the run. The defensive line has to be stout and in the right place, all that stuff. But if the BYU corners can lock down on the wide receivers and limit big plays, then the other guys can come up and do stuff that'll help compensate for the talent that Notre Dame's going to bring against them.
I'm interested to watch the matchup with the guy you just mentioned, tight end Michael Mayer, Mel Kiper's #1 tight end in the country. He's got 22 catches for 233 and 3 touchdowns, which is half of their receiving touchdowns, by the way. He's super legit. How do you feel like BYU matches up with him? And is there an individual that can guard him?
No, I don't think there's one guy on BYU's team that can guard him, just because he's bigger and stronger than the guys that could run with him. And he's too much of a route runner. He's got too much speed for the guys that are big enough to be able to actually physically match up with him. So that's a problem. That means that what they'll have to do is make sure that whoever is covering him be close enough to him that 2 things happen. Number 1, Drew Pine, the quarterback, has to make a precision throw. And that usually will mean something up high, where Mayer, if he can get up there and get it, there's not a whole lot BYU can do about it. The second thing is that when Mayer does make a catch, tackle him right there. Don't miss a tackle and let him run for another 20 yards. So he's a guy that you don't stop. Michael Mayer is a guy you need to limit.
Where does BYU have a clear advantage against Notre Dame, in your opinion, Trevor?
I think there's 2 clear advantages. One is the outside cover guys against Notre Dame's outside receivers. The second one is Jaron Hall. BYU's in much better shape than Notre Dame at quarterback. This is no disrespect to Drew Pine, but he's a backup who came in off the bench, who doesn't have the experience of Hall, and he certainly doesn't have the big arm and downfield accuracy of Hall. That's the big difference. So that's why BYU's defense can afford to not sell out to get pressure on the quarterback, but Notre Dame's defense had better get pressure on the quarterback. And BYU's offensive line has been criticized for disappearing in the running game at times, and some of that's fair, some of it's not. But nobody disputes that BYU's offensive line is outstanding at protecting the quarterback. And so really the key for the win for BYU is for Jaron Hall to remain clean in terms of his ability to step into throws and have a clean pocket, and let him be his best quarterback. Let him excel to the level of his capability. And if they do that, BYU does have a good chance to win this game.
Do you feel like BYU has to establish the run to be able to win, or can Jaron Hall carry BYU to victory with the pass alone?
I think that he can carry them to victory with the pass alone if he gets protection. The problem, if you don't establish the run, is that the pass rush of the other side can tee off on you. And that's where the issue is. Normally you establish the run, it slows down the pass rush, it makes play action work. They have to bring safeties up, and you can throw it over the top and all the things that a good running game provides to the passing game. But Jaron Hall is so good, and the young receivers of BYU have established themselves as being dangerous so well. And then you've got the emergence of a stable of running backs that can do different things. That if you give Hall time to work, that I think he'd be able to overcome that. Now, it would put more stress on the offensive line if they can't run, because now Notre Dame's defensive front will play the run on the way to the quarterback. I mean, they'll just tee off to get upfield, and if there's a running back there, they'll go, oh, and try to tackle him like that and let the linebackers clean up behind him. It's better if you can establish the run. But this is a tough Notre Dame defense, and so establishing the run would be it's doable for BYU, but it would be a great accomplishment because it's an outstanding opponent.
Trevor, when you look back at BYU's win on Thursday against Utah State, without question, it was an ugly win. BYU was a 24-point favorite. They win by 12, but the Cougars found a way to win, unlike several other teams in the top 25 in a turbulent weekend who did not figure out how to win. So is there just value in just getting the win regardless of how ugly or clean it is when you're just trying to stay nationally relevant like a team like BYU is trying to do?
Ultimately, getting the win is the most important thing. Survive and advance. I mean, look at what happened to Georgia. Georgia goes on the road to Missouri. Missouri hits them in the mouth. It was a tricky matchup for Georgia. Missouri just attacked the line of scrimmage and got into the backfield and disrupted the passing game and the running game from their own backfield. And then the defensive backs of Missouri jumped all over the Georgia receivers so that they had to have that precision pass, and there weren't very many yards after the catch. But at halftime, Georgia made some outstanding adjustments. The leadership stepped up, and they clawed their way back to win that game. That is kind of like what happened to BYU. They ran into an opponent in Utah State that had a new starting quarterback. They brought in some new zone concept, option concept stuff that BYU didn't know to expect from them necessarily. And it kind of rocked BYU back on their heels. The leadership showed up at halftime and they clawed their way back. So there's a lot of value in that. However, BYU missed an opportunity. They missed an opportunity to be more disciplined, to be more focused, to not hurt themselves as much as they have this year. I mean, they're one of the most penalized teams in the entire nation in college football. And some penalties are inevitable. I mean, you'll have a holding call, a defensive pass interference. Sometimes you'll have a slightly late hit out of bounds. Not egregious, but just slightly because you're just flying around. And these kinds of things happen, okay. But pre-snap penalties are unacceptable. False starts at home, defense jumping off sides, never. And then personal fouls, never, ever. And at this point, BYU has to prove that they're a disciplined team, and that's a weird place for them to be, because all the penalties that they've had, especially the kinds of penalties that they've had, and the kinds of penalties they had against Utah State, demonstrate that they have a lot of work to do there. And I would have preferred that they played a much more clean game against the Aggies heading into Notre Dame, because now they're going to have to put a clean stop to all the undisciplined plays that hurt them and play clean from the beginning against Notre Dame, or Notre Dame's going to take advantage.
I'm going to give you a stat before I ask you a question. Since the start of 2019, BYU's 23-1 when the kickoff time is 6 p.m. or later, local to the game site. With that said, BYU and Arkansas, 1:30 Mountain Time coming up next week. What do you think of that kick time?
That's great. It's fine. I mean, BYU, yeah, okay, they do great at night games. That's great, but football is football. And I can see if they went to the East Coast and there was an issue with, or the West Coast, I guess it would be. Anyway, teams that travel against the time zone and they end up starting much earlier than they expected in terms of their body clock, that's an issue. This is not. You're talking about 1:30 Mountain Time. That's fine. And so I think that BYU has a chance to have a massive game in a featured national window. And I think that's a great opportunity for the team. And this Notre Dame game, FPI, Football Power Index, gives BYU only a 30% chance to win. But from this moment in time, and this will all change as time goes on, they are favored by FPI in all the remaining games. And so it's an interesting thing that Arkansas game starting at 1:30, BYU right now will be favored by FPI in that game, regardless of the game start.
A great point. BYU hoping they can establish some Lavelle Edwards Stadium magic, even in the afternoon against Arkansas. But first, Notre Dame this Saturday in Las Vegas. Trevor, we appreciate the time as always.
Thanks, guys.
ESPN's Trevor Matich with us on BYU Sports Nation. 3-point underdog, he says it's fair for BYU.
It is.
Given what's happened the past few weeks.
And back to the Arkansas time, which just came out, right? 9-10 before 6. But I do recall USC, I recall Wisconsin being some notable wins before 6. So it's not like BYU just automatically loses. But certainly if BYU's playing 6 or after, 23-1 is crazy. The one loss is Utah at home to open the 2019 season.
What is Arkansas? And again, this game will be on either ESPN or ABC, which is fantastic. Huge national spotlight game.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last spotlight game BYU got exposed against Oregon. You hope it's different at home.
What is Arkansas? I told you they'd have a tough slate. Lost to Texas A&M on a weird field goal. Probably shouldn't have lost that game. Get beat up by Alabama. Made it close for a little bit.
With 28, they were down 20-0. They scored 23 straight. Yeah.
Now they got Mississippi State on the road. Mississippi State's ranked, and they got to come to Provo. What are they?
Hopefully they're just beat up, and the BYU isn't after the Notre Dame.
There you go.
After further review, breaks down the X's and O's like nobody else. So break down the Utah State game, preview the winning matchups against Notre Dame, 7 Eastern on the BYU TV app tomorrow.
And who knew Zach Wilson had pretty clean gritty in his repertoire? he pulled it off yesterday in a number of ways. But is that the best version of the dance? Stay with us. This is BYU Sports Nation.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
If you're looking to build your brand awareness and increase market share as BYU moves into the Big 12, this is the place, BYU Athletics. We can provide the tools you need to make sure your company is seen and heard. BYU Athletics is where you can align your products and services with loyal fans that cheer for our Cougars. And they can also help your business win. Learn more about what a partnership with BYU Athletics and your company will look like. After all, this is the place. Email sponsorship at byu.edu today.
Trio Orem Senior Living believes in empowering seniors to live life to the fullest. We help eliminate stress out of daily life when you live at Trio. Less time focusing on housework means you can socialize at one of our many events, with safety in mind, of course. And did we mention our spacious apartments with modern amenities? Learn more about setting up a private tour at trioorem.com.
Football in Utah is all about the rivalries.
Red. Ooh, quarterback. Wide out. Rewards. Wait, what? My style, checking rewards. My style, right.
For Mountain America's My Style Checking, it's all about the benefits.
Loan discounts.
But it's hard to pick a favorite.
No, mobile phone protection. Telehealth. You're gonna need that when we're done. I heard that, let's go.
Get the account rivaled by no one. My Style Checking from Mountain America.
Hey family, if you're looking for something new to watch, stop scrolling and start streaming. BYU TV has a ton of great options to binge together. From bold adventure to family drama and even a little fun, there's something for everyone. Binge entire series, experience all the feels, immerse in non-stop intrigue, and treat yourself to unexpected turns. Think you know BYU TV? We're just getting started.
There's more to this show than just the show. You can follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok.
Welcome back to BYU Sports Station, live in Studio B. I am Spencer Linton alongside Jarom Jordan. You know what time it is. Let's whip it. Cougar Whip Around, presented by Maersk, your integrated logistics shipping partner.
Better jersey video reveal in our biased opinion, the BYU UFC Matt Franco video or the Notre Dame hangover video?
It's clearly BYU. The production level of BYU. I mean, it was funny what Notre Dame did. Like, got a few laughs from me, but...
Our audience isn't the audience for that one. Is theirs?
I have no idea. That's a fair question. But when you team up with the UFC and you get a dude who's won America's Got Talent and has his own show in Vegas, he's doing card tricks to reveal it. And just so many high-level production elements in the BYU video. So, yeah, in my completely unbiased opinion, I'm leaning towards BYU.
Yeah, unbiased? Are you sure? Yeah, no, absolutely. BYU's was very, very good. And guess what? They got to go second in OT, if you will. They saw what Notre Dame did, and then they could go from there.
All right. BYU and Arkansas will kick it 3:30 p.m. Eastern. That's 1:30 local in Lavelle Edwards Stadium against the Razorbacks on either ESPN or ABC on a scale of 1 to 10. How concerned are you with an afternoon kick time?
Not concerned. Certainly there's, as Cougar Stat said, there's correlation versus causation. BYU isn't winning or not because of the time. There's correlation, though. No, it's all good. And the games I referenced before of USC and Wisconsin, those, USC was 2019, but Wisconsin was 2018. So, yes, BYU's won. In the afternoon, what I really need, though, is Skycam. Please, Skycam. Love Skycam.
The majority of the afternoon weird performances have been on the road. Like, you think about UAB, Baylor, Oregon. I know Boise State was an afternoon game, but the majority of these games, in my opinion, feel like they've been on the road.
At least. And do we care before 2019?
No, not really. Not really.
Because that was like sophomore Zach Wilson and Brady Christensen and Dax Milne. And
think about BYU's
and
5 losses. They've gone 25-5 in the last 30 games. Think about the 5 losses. The majority have been on the road in those afternoon kick slots. This is a home game where BYU's won a big game. So I'd say I'm like a 3. I'd love it at night because then I just feel like BYU's going to win the game.
They'll win the game. BYU's won 15 in a row at night.
They'll win the game if it's at night. Now it's a little bit of, something like a 3, maybe a 4 on the concern scale.
Not that good. Cosmo goes viral again with his 3-tier table push-up stunt. Is this in your top 5?
Sure. But I feel like it's like rotating constantly, like, okay, 4 and 5. Like, number 1 for me still is like probably the human pyramid dunk from the 3-point line. Like that.
A 3-pointer. It was a 3-point dunk.
That and like skydiving into Lavelle Edwards Stadium. Like that too is pretty insane. At night, no less. So he's done some incredible things. Let's probably like, I don't know, number 4, number 5. Just cycle him through because he does something viral like 5 times every year.
I know it's not Tuesday, but I've got a top 5. Let's go. Number 5.
Wow.
3-tier push-up makes the list. Number 5. Number 4, the dunk from the 3-point line that you mentioned. Number 3, parachuting into LES during the Wyoming game. Number 2, the performance with Ayo and Teo at the Gonzaga game a few years ago. And then number 1's the OG viral dance with Charlie Bird in 2017 to Rolex.
See, I didn't go with the dances because the Cougarettes were involved there, so I didn't think it was just like I thought it had to be like just a Cosmo thing.
I split them up. Those are my top 5.
Okay. Yeah. A solid top 5.
Yeah. Cosmo's the best. He really is.
All right. A new bowl game has been projected from ESPN, having BYU play Cal in the First Responders Bowl. Is Cal a more attractive matchup than the previous projections that feature the likes of Mizzou, Coastal Carolina, or App State?
No. I would rather play those teams than Cal. Although Christopher Brooks, that storyline would be fun, but no, Coastal would be the best, App State would be second, and then Missouri. I know Power 5, ... App State would be a fun one.
Give me Coastal Carolina or Mizzou any day.
I want
a compelling.
And again, don't tell them till Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay, first it was you, then it was Keanu Hill, and now it's Zach Wilson.
Yep.
With the gritty, in your, again, biased opinion, as we see all 3. How about that? Who did it the best?
Well, only one of us is a middle-aged vanilla man, Jarom. So I'd like to see Keanu and Zach do this when they're my age. And then we can really assess who did it best, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
I thought Keanu's was super clean. Zach's was really good. Mine, but only one of us also got a tweet from the dude who invented the gritty.
That's true. I like all 3. I think you really brought it. I liked Keanu's technique just a little more.
Keanu was really clean.
Yeah.
Super clean.
Your steps were super wide for me.
Yeah.
Like it matters. I'm just. That's great. I don't dare do it.
All right. Better personal moment over the weekend.
Okay, this is challenging to say the least.
Your Seattle Mariners clinching a playoff spot in dramatic fashion. ending the longest playoff drought in professional sports. 21 years.
So great. Right in it.
Or President Russell M. Nelson announcing that
We're going here.
there is a temple now happening in my old mission stomping grounds in Busan, South Korea.
I texted you immediately. I was like,
straight
dude.
miracle that this is happening, in my opinion there.
Yeah.
There's no wrong answer, Jarom. There's no wrong answer.
Hard to top a temple. But the temple known as T-Mobile Park also had a miracle, which was the Mariners making the playoffs. At bottom of the ninth, full count, tie game, Cal Raleigh, boom, just crushes it. To send them to the playoffs. So happy.
We got to get you to the game.
I have tickets to the 3 wildcard games at all 4 ALCS games.
We got to
not
get
the
you there.
ALDS. Well, it's probably going to be in Cleveland.
You have 7 different
Or
tickets.
in
You have
Toronto.
You have tickets for 7 games.
Yes, I do. I dropped $3,300 in potential tickets. Now, if the Mariners play on the road, I get the wild cards back. But if they win that and win the DS, I'm ready to go in the ALCS. Although I would take a game in the DS. So let's go. BYU football's Kalani's Take airs tomorrow night, 8:30 Eastern, where they will break down the Mariners in the playoffs. Just kidding. Big-time matchup in Vegas, obviously. Cody Epps in the film room. Deep Blue features former football player turned actor Longi Tuifua, and Gunnar Romney is the guest.
Zach Wilson showed out for Jarom this weekend in our fantasy football head-to-head competition. Is it enough for Jarom to get the win?
Let's go!
With Fred Warner still playing on my team tonight. This is BYU Sports Nation.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by Maersk, your e-commerce logistics shipping partner.
Quick crack. Wash all you want. Don't drive dirty.
This is BYU football with Kalani Sitake and Greg Wrubell.
When I was younger, I was a better dancer. Don't show any more dancing. Okay, good. I think we've developed some really good habits the last couple of weeks and looking to step it up again. A lot of great things can happen when they care.
Not bad. That's good stuff.
Hey. Yeah, thank you for ending on that one. That was a good one.
Welcome back to BYU Sports Nation live in Studio B. Happy Monday, everyone. Spencer and Jarom here. It's time for our Fantasy Football Friday update.
I am back in it, people.
Some things still pending tonight. Monday Night Football. All right, let's go ahead and recap my points. Jaron Hall put up 25 in the win against Utah State. Gunnar Romney had 5 points. I did not start Jamal Williams this week.
That
one hurts.
That was a mistake.
That one hurts, but I had to go with my heart because Gunnar was playing his first game. Fred Warner plays tonight, Jarom. So I've got 30 points going into Fred Warner.
Pretty good.
Whatever he can pull off against the Rams.
Fred is capable of a double-digit night. He is. He's awesome.
Like tackle for loss, like
pick,
6 tackles,
fumble,
pick, forced fumble.
And here's the thing. You're going to need it. Because your boy finally has a lead. Zach is back. Look out, New York. Okay? 22 points. He's got that dog in him. 14 points, I thought, for
Ben Bywater with 14.
Okay, and then Miles Davis has 3. So I've got 30. I got 8 points on you going into the night. Now Fred could get you the win, but I need this.
Fred is averaging.
I need this.
Fred is averaging just 5.3 points per week.
I'm feeling good. Against the Rams, he may rack up a bunch of tackles. Who knows?
We'll see.
Is it at San Fran?
I believe it's at San Francisco. Yes.
Okay. Well, I always say go other team, not name them that.
So
tonight is especially.
We're watching Fred Warner to see if Jarom can get out the schneid.
Shout out to Zach. Shout out to Zach.
Is my
Zach
perfect record in peril?
I have waited for Zach. Like, I picked him even though I knew it was hurt because I needed a quarterback on Jaron Hall thing here, and now we're going.
Yeah.
Now we team Jarom back in this.
If you win this week, now
it's competitive.
Some hope is restored for you because you're down 4-0.
Down 0-4.
You win this one, then maybe, right? Then maybe.
Fred, no offense. I hope you get 7 tackles and nothing. Okay? That's what I want.
You want Fred to have 7 tackles and the 49ers
7
to lose?
tackles and nothing. Well, I don't really care. The Seahawks.
Tank for Jaron.
I want a good quarterback.
Tank for Jaron.
I'm not in it. We won 2 games. I was like, hey, guys, settle down. Let's go. Good to have Zach.
Indeed.
Zach. Well done.
Indeed.
Okay, unbeaten in its last 3 games, BYU women's soccer. WCC play continues, taking on, speaking of, San Francisco, taking on the Niners, 9 Eastern time, a.k.a. the Dons, on Wednesday night.
Man, the ladies have a bunch of ties. Be nice to see
They killed overtime in the regular season. That's what happened.
Changed everything.
That's what happened.
Be nice to see them get an overwhelming win against the Dons. All right, up next, your rise and shout out on a Monday. And it's a well-deserved one for a process that took a long time to bring out in the reveal of these uniforms. This is BYU Sports Nation.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork offers a large inventory of Ford vehicles, including a selection of cars and trucks, providing a range of transportation choices. From the Ford Fusion sedan and the Edge crossover SUV to a range of pickups including the F-150. Each product line comes with options to enhance performance, comfort, and safety. Think Ford, think Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork.
Before I was a coach at BYU, or before I was even a player, I was a BYU fan. That's why BYU football exists, is because of the fans. To have a bunch of fans that want to see you be aggressive, I think everybody can live through our 123 guys on the roster and the 11 that are on the field at a time. Really, it all starts and ends with the fans.
Oakland A's are not a sound baseball team.
Dad, there's no way you're gonna lose your job, right?
Your goal shouldn't be to buy players. Your goal should be to buy wins.
We're gonna shake things up. You are outside your mind. Dab to die.
They are the story in sports in this entire country.
You may not look like a winning team, but you are one.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by Mountain America, the official credit union of BYU Athletics.
Oh, the Royal Navy and the black, baby, for Notre Dame.
Ombre.
Ombre. You're my ombre. The show's on demand. Download the free BYU TV and BYU radio apps. Download the podcast as well. Subscribe, rate, and review.
A question of the day. Do you like BYU going into the Notre Dame game as an underdog, yes or no?
Who doesn't? I want to know that. Like, who does? Who's like, no, I wish we were favored.
Tanner Clements on Twitter says, if BYU plays like they did against Wyoming and Utah State, then BYU deserves to be the underdog. BYU can't play like crap, Tanner says, in the first half, and just flip a switch in the second half against Notre Dame. BYU has to start the game like it's quarter 3. Well,
they just walk out with threes.
Okay, so I'll say this. Was BYU like this unbelievable first-half team against Baylor? No.
It was against USF. The first quarter was
That's
awesome.
the only good first half that BYU's had.
But USF stinks.
All season. Yeah, and USF is, as you said, not good.
Would BYU have been the favorite, Spence, if they had dominated the last 2 weeks? Or would it be a pick 'em?
Probably a pick 'em, or maybe Notre Dame by like 1.
If BYU had won by 30 in each?
Probably.
Because there's not a lot of reason to believe that BYU is going to win the game if you're Vegas outside of, well, they beat Baylor, but it's like, well.
But that was in Provo.
That's been a minute.
In double overtime.
Yeah.
Yeah, Baylor's a lot like Notre Dame. Physical. Again, I pointed this out earlier in the show. Very, very physical on defense. They want to run downhill at you methodically.
Notre Dame going to run 52 times, though. I think they'll have more variance. They have an elite player in Michael Mayer that they can really hit.
They might throw 28 passes to him.
They haven't like found the other guys. Like they're like BYU in terms of the rushing game, where they have quality and they have several guys, but they haven't like said you're the guy.
How much?
Who's BYU's RB1? We're still asking that question.
And Trevor Matich said this earlier, and I agree 100%. BYU has a clear advantage in the quarterback matchup.
Totally. In every game they play this year, they will. Even against KJ Jefferson next week. I believe Jaron Hall is a better player than KJ. KJ is a very good player.
Yes.
But Jaron's a better quarterback.
Man.
That's a good matchup.
I feel like Notre Dame has a better defense than BYU does, for sure.
Totally.
Notre Dame held Ohio State to 21 points.
At home. Season opener.
21 points in Columbus.
Yeah.
Like, there's something there.
Granted, they played, and they played like a just a base kind of shell defense. They made Ohio State make plays. Will they do that against BYU, or will it be more nuanced?
Yeah. What does BYU's run defense do? Like, let's start there.
It's got to show up.
Let's start there.
It's got to show up. Ain't
All
no
right.
Cooper Legas coming at you.
Our elite voice of the day presented by PAX Healthcare Elevated from @KipKint. Absolutely likes BYU as an underdog. There is pressure in being the favorite, even if the margin is small. Loose plays better than pressure every time. I like the way BYU plays when they play loose and the boys are having fun.
Like they don't have something to lose.
Go to Vegas, roll the dice, play loose, have fun, and just win, baby. BYU does have something.
A lot of Raiders vibes there.
Number 16 in the country. They're playing for a ranking. They're playing to prove that they are not just, one good win against Baylor. Like, are they legit?
BYU, like, if BYU doesn't show up the next 3 weeks, Arkansas Liberty, BYU could be 500. Like, BYU has got to show up in the next 3 weeks.
Today's Rise and Shout Out presented by Mountain America, the official credit union of BYU Athletics. Let's give it to the folks with BYU equipment. Listen, Billy Nixon was working on that helmet for a long time. This production, Josh Hewitt. Huge effort went into this.
Yeah.
Social media team as well. Tyson Hutchins, Stu Cole, David Almadova. I mean, amazing.
And it looks great. Like, the video is great. The jersey looks great. It's a big-time situation here with Notre Dame Saturday.
Our thanks to today's guest, Trevor Matich of ESPN.
And the conversation continues 24/7 on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Plus, get all your content on BYUSN.com. Start a dentist, no time.
For Jarom, I am Spencer. Shout out to John Walsh. We're going 94, the team that beat Notre Dame every time this week. Coordinator's Corner, 2 p.m. Eastern. Back here in Studio B. Go Cougs.